Welcome to our deep dive into the ancient Nile Valley civilization. We're going way beyond pyramids and pharaohs this time.
Yeah, you might think you know it all already, but
Mm.
we've got some really cool stuff to look at.
Yeah.
We got a textbook chapter, images of artifacts.
Oh, and a comic strip.
Yes,
Hmm.
about grave robbing. We're going to get into their everyday lives, their
We
beliefs.
even brewed their own beer.
Exactly. And what I find really interesting is how we're going to see how their society was structured, their understanding of the world, the cosmos even, shaped by this very unique environment.
Well, let's start with that environment then. I mean, you can't talk about the Nile Valley civilization without talking about the Nile River, can you?
No, absolutely. The Nile River is over 6,650 kilometers long,
Whoa.
and it was literally the lifeblood of this entire civilization. It provided everything, their highway for trade and transportation, irrigation for their crops.
Wow, that's even longer than the entire Amazon River.
It is.
Imagine relying on a river that massive for basically everything. And speaking of relying on the Nile, we have a map here showing key cities along the river,
Yeah.
like Thebes, Memphis, and Aswan. What would it have been like to live in these bustling, ancient cities?
Well, let's take Memphis, for example. One of the ancient capitals in this city had a population of about 30,000 people at its peak.
Wow.
That's huge for a city thousands of years ago.
Yeah.
And we actually have an artist's impression of what Memphis might have looked like.
Oh, let me see. Wow, look at this. A moat and a port connected directly to the Nile. There are houses, shops, iron factories.
Breweries.
Whoa, a real commercial hub.
Exactly. And all of this before modern technology. I mean, they had to overcome some serious architectural challenges too, especially with the scarcity of timber in the Nile Valley.
So how did they build these incredible structures without readily available wood?
Well, they innovated using mud bricks and stones.
Oh, okay.
And surprisingly, these led to incredibly durable structures that have stood the test of time.
Speaking of durable structures, we can't forget about the most iconic symbols of ancient Egypt, the pyramids and temples. Some of these structures had walls even larger than city walls. I mean, what kind of mathematical precision and manpower did it take to construct something that massive?
It's mind-boggling, the sheer scale. But the pyramids, especially, were more than just tombs. They were powerful statements of religious belief, reflecting the pharaoh's role as this divine ruler, and they were meant to last forever.
Okay, so we know ancient Egypt was ruled by pharaohs for centuries.
Yes.
But where did it all begin?
Well, around 3200 BC, a king named Menes unified Upper and Lower Egypt, merging the two kingdoms into one. This kicked off what we call the dynastic period, a series of dynasties that ruled for centuries.
Wow, that's a monumental event. Unifying two separate kingdoms is no small feat, especially thousands of years ago.
Exactly. It brought stability, better control over resources, and really laid the foundation for all the incredible achievements of the Nile Valley civilization. And speaking of achievements, we can't overlook their unique social structure. We have this diagram here.
Oh,
You won't believe this. It's shaped like a pyramid.
a pyramid-shaped diagram for their society. You're kidding.
I'm serious. It's called a social pyramid, and it represents the hierarchy of ancient Egyptian society.
All right, I'm hooked. Break it down for us. Who is at the top? Who is at the bottom? And where did everyone else fit in?
Okay, so at the very top, you had the pharaoh, considered a living god.
Wow.
Then came the royal family, nobles, priests, and scribes.
So the keepers of knowledge?
Exactly. Below them were merchants and craftsmen, and then farmers who made up the backbone of their agricultural system.
Right.
And then finally at the bottom were the slaves.
Wow, it really makes you think about how this kind of social structure compares to our own modern society, doesn't it? Do we still have these kinds of strict hierarchies, or are things completely different now?
It's a great question. While our social structures have definitely evolved, looking at these ancient hierarchies like this one
Right.
can give us some really interesting insights into how human civilizations have developed over time.
All right, let's move on to something a little more divine. We know the ancient Egyptians were polytheistic,
Yes.
meaning they believed in many gods. And they weren't shy about expressing their devotion. I mean, temples, festivals, the works.
And it goes even deeper than that. Each city had its own patron god, and then there was this whole pantheon of deities who represented every aspect of life, death, and the natural world.
So who were some of the most important players in this divine drama?
Well, there was Osiris, the god of life, his wife Isis, the goddess of fertility, and their son Horus, the god of the sky.
Wow, a powerful family.
Yes, and then let's not forget Anubis,
Yeah.
with the jackal
Oh,
head,
yeah, Anubis.
who guided souls to the afterlife.
Bro,
Now, what's really interesting is that their religious beliefs weren't static.
yeah.
They actually evolved over time. So early on, each local area had its own god. But as time went on, those local gods were often combined with the sun god Ra,
Oh, okay.
making him the king of the gods.
So their belief system was constantly adapting and changing, just like their society.
Exactly. Yeah. Their religious beliefs were this core part of their lives, influencing their art, architecture, just about everything they did.
Yeah.
And what I find fascinating is comparing these Egyptian gods with gods from other ancient cultures.
Yeah.
You start to see some recurring themes and archetypes.
Like the sky god, the mother goddess, the god of the underworld.
Exactly.
They all seem to pop up everywhere, right? It makes you wonder if there's some sort of shared human experience there, some universal way of trying to grapple with those big questions of life and death.
I think so. And by looking at these ancient beliefs, we can gain some really fascinating insights into human nature and this eternal search for meaning. Now, when it comes to death, the ancient Egyptians had a very specific belief. The soul could survive death, but it needed a body to return to.
Hence, mummification. I've always been fascinated by that process. Talk about dedication to the afterlife.
It was a complex and meticulous process, taking around 70 days to complete. They used linen, spices, salts,
Wow.
and they even removed internal organs, stored them in these separate jars. It required an incredible level of skill and knowledge.
And we actually have an image here showing assistants supplying linen and spices to a body. It must have been quite a sight, but I bet it wasn't cheap.
You're right, only royalty and the wealthy could afford this very elaborate process. Which is interesting because it shows that social stratification continued even in death.
Wow. And speaking of death, that reminds me of our comic strip. Grave robbing was considered a serious crime in ancient Egypt, right?
Yes.
I mean, if disturbing a tomb disrupted the soul's journey, that's a pretty big deal.
Absolutely. The punishment for stealing from a tomb was death. It shows just how sacred they considered death and the afterlife.
It wasn't something to be taken lightly.
Yep.
Clearly, the ancient Egyptians were incredibly innovative, not just in their architecture and mummification, but in their understanding of science, medicine, even astronomy.
Or absolutely. They mastered metallurgy, creating alloys for their tools and weapons. They knew a lot about herbal medicines, and they even performed surgeries. And let's not forget about their brewing skills.
Hold on. They were performing surgeries thousands of years ago. What kind of surgeries are we talking about?
Well, we don't have detailed accounts of every procedure, but there's evidence that they did bone setting, wound treatment, even some forms of dentistry.
Wow, that's incredible. Imagine the skill it took to perform those procedures with the limited tools they had. I'm sensing another deep dive here, just on ancient Egyptian medicine.
Perhaps. But let's not forget about the brewing. Beer was a staple in their diet, providing both nutrition and, of course, enjoyment.
And we have a picture here of ancient Egyptians brewing beer. Imagine having a cold one on the banks of the Nile thousands of years ago. I wonder what their recipe was like.
That's something we can explore further. But beyond brewing, they also had this impressive astronomical knowledge. They developed a 365-day calendar based on the Nile's flood cycle, which was crucial for their agriculture. They even invented the sundial to track time.
It's amazing how they used their understanding of the natural world to develop these practical solutions for their everyday lives. Their innovations weren't just random inventions, they were driven by necessity and this deep understanding of their environment.
Exactly. They were masters of observation and adaptation, and by harnessing this knowledge, they were able to thrive in what could be a very challenging environment.
It really makes you appreciate the ingenuity and resilience of the human spirit, doesn't it? They accomplish so much without the technology that we take for granted today.
It really does. It's a testament to the power of human curiosity and our drive to innovate. And I think it also reminds us of how various fields of knowledge are interconnected. Their advancements in astronomy directly impacted their agricultural practices and economic stability.
That's true. It's a great reminder that knowledge is power, and that innovation often comes from needing to solve these very practical problems.
And perhaps it's also a reminder that even the most advanced civilizations are not immune to change.
Which leads us to the decline of the Nile Valley civilization. After centuries of dominance, they were eventually conquered by the Macedonians in the 4th century BC.
Right, and after that, Greek culture began to spread rapidly throughout the region. The rise and fall of civilizations is a recurring theme throughout history. It really makes you think about what factors contribute to a civilization's longevity. Was it inevitable that the Nile Valley civilization would eventually fall?
That's a complex question. It's like trying to solve a historical puzzle,
It is.
trying to piece together all the factors that led to their decline.
And we'll delve into that more in the next part of our deep dive.
Sounds good. Stay tuned because we're just getting started.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the Nile Valley civilization. Before we move on, I wanted to circle back to something we touched on earlier.
Okay.
The decline of this incredible civilization.
Yeah, it's almost hard to believe, right? I mean, they achieved so much, these monumental structures, complex systems of governance, such a deep understanding of the natural world, and yet, eventually, they faded from power.
It is. It's a stark reminder that civilizations, just like individuals, are subject to change. They have a lifespan, a period of growth and flourishing, and ultimately decline or transformation.
It really makes you wonder about those factors that contribute to a civilization's longevity or, lack thereof. What do you think? Was it inevitable that the Nile Valley civilization would eventually fall?
Well, that's a question that historians have been grappling with for centuries, really. It's never a single cause. It's usually a confluence of events,
Oh, okay.
a perfect storm of internal and external pressures.
So kind of like a recipe for decline. You've got your internal strife, maybe some political instability, then you add in some environmental changes and a dash of external pressure from neighboring civilizations, and boom, the civilization crumbles.
It's a good analogy.
Hmm.
And while we can analyze the historical record and try to pinpoint those specific ingredients, it's important to remember that we're looking at a very complex tapestry of events,
Right.
each one influencing the other.
That makes sense. History isn't always a neat and tidy narrative. Sometimes it's messy, full of twists and turns and unexpected outcomes.
Exactly. Now, I want to shift gears for a moment. We've talked about their grand achievements, their social structure, their beliefs, even their decline. But what about the everyday lives of the people who lived in this civilization? What was it actually like to be an ancient Egyptian, going about their daily routine?
Yeah, I'm really curious about that. I mean, we've seen that image of them brewing beer, and we know it was like a staple in their diet.
Yeah, and it wasn't just for the elite either. People
Hmm.
from all social classes actually enjoyed beer. And in fact, it was often safer to drink than the water, which could be contaminated.
So it was a practical choice as well as a pleasurable one. I have to admit, I'm a bit envious. Imagine having a fresh brewed beer after a long day's work, relaxing on the banks of the Nile.
It's a good reminder that even in ancient civilizations, people sought out those moments of leisure and enjoyment,
Yeah.
those simple pleasures that make life a little bit sweeter.
Absolutely. Speaking of enjoyment, I'm curious about their other forms of entertainment. Did they have music? Did they play games? What did they do for fun?
Well, while our sources don't give us an exhaustive list of their leisure activities, we know that storytelling and music were deeply ingrained in their culture.
Uh-huh.
And they were also big fans of board games, some of which have survived to this day.
Wow. So some of the games we play today might have originated in ancient Egypt. I wonder if they ever had those heated arguments over board games like we do today.
It's certainly possible. Human nature, as we know, is timeless.
That's true. That's true. Okay, so they had their beer, they had their games, they had stories and music. What about family life? What was it like to raise a family in ancient Egypt?
Well, families were really the foundation of their society. Children were highly valued and were taught the skills they would need to succeed in their respective social roles.
I imagine education was quite different back then. No Wi-Fi, no smartphones, no textbooks, just good old-fashioned face-to-face learning.
That's right. Education was primarily focused on practical skills and religious instruction. And scribes played a really vital role in this process,
Yeah.
as they were the keepers of knowledge responsible for passing it down to the generations.
Right. But it also makes you wonder about the power dynamics in a society where literacy was limited to a select few.
You're hitting on a really important point. Access to information and education has always been key in shaping those social hierarchies, both in ancient societies and in our own world today.
Okay, enough serious talk for now. Let's move on to something a bit more uh, stylish. I've always been fascinated by ancient Egyptian fashion. You know, those linen garments, the elaborate headdresses, all the jewelry. It's also striking.
Their clothing was more than just stylish, though. It was practical, too, designed to cope with that hot desert climate. Linen, for instance, was a popular choice because of its breathability.
And let's not forget about those iconic headdresses, the pharaoh's crown, the Neem's headdress. I mean, those were serious fashion
They
statements.
were much more than fashion statements.
Yes.
Those headdresses were powerful symbols of authority, often adorned with precious metals and gemstones.
It's clear that the ancient Egyptians had a very keen sense of aesthetics, not just in their clothing, but also in their art and architecture.
Absolutely. Their art especially was highly stylized and symbolic, reflecting their religious beliefs and worldview.
And those hieroglyphs, talk about a complex writing system. What was it like to be a scribe, tasked with mastering those intricate symbols?
Well, becoming a scribe was a long and demanding
I
process.
bet.
But it was also a path to prestige and influence. You see, hieroglyphs weren't just a form of writing. They were an art form, often used to decorate those tombs and temples.
It's incredible to think about the level of skill and artistry involved in creating those intricate symbols. It really puts our modern alphabet to shame.
It's a good reminder of the richness and complexity of human language
Yeah.
and all the different ways that we've developed to communicate our thoughts and ideas.
Yeah. So we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive. We've explored their history, their beliefs, their daily lives, even their fashion choices. But I'm curious, what aspects of the Nile Valley civilization do you find most enduring? What lessons can we learn from them today, thousands of years after their civilization reached its peak?
You know what strikes me most is their resilience and their ability to adapt to a really challenging environment. They didn't just survive in the desert, they thrived. They harnessed the power of the Nile, developed sophisticated agricultural techniques, and created this vibrant and enduring culture.
Yeah, I totally agree. They were masters of innovation, using their knowledge and creativity to solve those very practical problems, create a rich and meaningful existence.
And even though their civilization eventually declined, their legacy lives on through that monumental architecture, their stunning art, their profound contributions to human knowledge.
It's amazing to think that even thousands of years later, we're still captivated by the mysteries of the pyramids, the beauty of their art, the wisdom embedded in their mythology. Their story is truly a testament to the enduring power of human creativity and our insatiable curiosity about the world around us.
And I think their story also serves as a reminder that even the most magnificent civilizations are subject to the ebb and flow of history.
Yeah, it's a sobering thought, but also a really powerful reminder to cherish the present moment and learn from both the triumphs and the missteps of those who came before us.
Exactly. Now, in the final part of our deep dive, we're going to explore some of the ongoing mysteries and debates surrounding the Nile Valley civilization. There's still so much we don't know, and those unanswered questions continue to intrigue scholars and enthusiasts alike.
Ooh, sounds like things are about to get even more interesting. Stay tuned, folks. Welcome back to the final part of our deep dive. We've journeyed through the rise and fall of the Nile Valley civilization, explored their beliefs, their daily lives, innovations, and even their fashion choices. But like any good story, there are always some lingering mysteries, right?
Exactly. Even after centuries of research, countless discoveries, the Nile Valley civilization still holds plenty of secrets. It still sparks some pretty heated debates among scholars.
Okay, spill the tea. What kind of mysteries are we talking about? Are we going full on ancient aliens here?
Not quite,
Yeah.
but one of the biggest head scratchers has got to be the construction of those incredible pyramids.
Hmm.
Oh, we have a general idea, of course, of the techniques they used, the massive workforce involved,
Right.
but the exact methods they used to move those colossal stone blocks, well, it's still up for debate.
It's mind-boggling to think about. Some of those stones weigh tons. How did they even lift them into place, especially without modern technology?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
There are tons of theories out there, from elaborate systems of ramps and levers to, well, more out there ideas involving sound waves,
Oh, wow.
or even some kind of lost ancient technology.
Okay, now we're getting into Indiana Jones territory. I'm all for a good adventure, but I have to admit, I tend to lean towards the more practical explanations. What are some of the leading theories among archaeologists and historians?
Well, most researchers believe they used a combination of, ingenuity, manpower, and a deep understanding of physics. Imagine huge teams of workers using ropes, rollers, levers,
Correct.
possibly even lubricating the paths with water or mud to
Mhm.
reduce friction.
Yeah, it still sounds like a Herculean effort, but I guess that's what made the ancient Egyptians so remarkable, They weren't afraid to tackle these seemingly impossible challenges.
Absolutely. And it's those unanswered questions that keep us fascinated, and drive further research. Who knows, maybe one day we'll uncover a lost scroll or a hidden chamber that reveals the true secrets of pyramid construction.
Now that would be an incredible discovery. Okay, so we've got the pyramid puzzle.
hmm
What other debates are swirling around the Nile Valley civilization?
Another hot topic is the question of race and ethnicity in ancient Egypt. Some scholars argue that the civilization was predominantly Black African,
Okay.
while others point to evidence of a more diverse population.
Yeah, this is where things can get a bit sensitive, right? I mean, we need to be really careful not to impose our modern ideas about race and ethnicity onto an ancient civilization.
You're absolutely right. It's crucial to approach this discussion with nuance and sensitivity,
Yeah.
recognizing that our understanding of these concepts has evolved over time.
So how do we navigate those different perspectives and interpretations?
Well, the key is to focus on the evidence. We need to carefully examine the historical record and be open to multiple interpretations. And we also need to remember that ancient Egypt wasn't this monolithic entity. It was a complex society,
Right.
with interactions and influences from various cultures.
So it wasn't a simple black and white issue, so to speak. There were many shades of gray, and we really need to consider all of the evidence before drawing any conclusions.
Exactly. And as new discoveries are made and research continues, our understanding of ancient Egypt will undoubtedly continue to evolve.
That's what makes history so fascinating. It's not just a static collection of facts and dates. It's a living, breathing field of study that's constantly being reshaped by new discoveries and new perspectives.
It is an ongoing conversation, a process of interpretation and reinterpretation.
So, as we wrap up this incredible deep dive into the Nile Valley civilization, what are some of the key takeaways you want our listeners to walk away with?
Well, first and foremost, I think the Nile Valley civilization was a testament to human ingenuity and resilience. They didn't just survive, they flourished in a challenging environment, creating a culture that has really left an indelible mark on human history.
I couldn't agree more. Their innovations, their art, their complex belief systems, it all speaks to the boundless potential of the human spirit.
Yes. Second, history is not static. It's an ongoing process of discovery and interpretation. And as we learn more about ancient Egypt, we're challenged to re-examine our own assumptions and broaden our understanding of the past.
Yeah, it's a reminder to stay curious, keep asking questions, and be open to those new perspectives. We may never have all the answers, but that journey of discovery is just as important as the destination.
I think so. And finally, the Nile Valley civilization, for all its grandeur and achievements, reminds us that civilizations, like all things, are subject to change. They rise, they flourish, and eventually they transform or fade away.
It's a sobering thought, but also a reminder to appreciate the present moment and learn from the successes and failures of those who came before us. Their legacy lives on, not just in the monuments they left behind, but in the lessons they teach us about human potential, adaptability, and the enduring power of the human spirit.
That's right. So as we conclude this journey through time, I encourage you to keep exploring the wonders of ancient Egypt. Delve deeper into the mysteries, ponder the unanswered questions, and let their story ignite your own sense of wonder and discovery.
Who knows what secrets are still waiting to be uncovered? Thanks for joining us on this incredible deep dive into the heart of the Nile Valley civilization. Until next time, keep exploring.